And I think actually what we're seeing is that heaven can wait. We're getting the rapture down here on earth, that we're getting like a reenactment of these biblical scenes. And maybe this is the appeal of this end times fascination among some Republican lawmakers, that this is actually their response to climate change. They don't need God's hand. They have a privatized disaster response. And maybe it also explains, Amy, and this is what's really alarming, is that, the environmental movement, the language of the environmental movement, we often hear, this is one crisis that we're all facing together. Even Dick Cheney has grandkids. We all are in this together. But when you see these privatized disaster responses, privatized firefighting, you have Blackwater in the midst of this pitching themselves as privatized humanitarian response and building tent cities and saying, we can do this better than the state. Then, I think we really need to question this basic premise that we are all in this together, and that maybe this explains the slowness and the unwillingness to take real action on the most pressing issue of our time, which is climate change.
You talk about Florida homeowners in last year's hurricane season and another company.
Yeah, I write about this in the book, that a year after Katrina, a new company was launched called HelpJet, which is a charter air service that launched with the slogan, turn a disaster into a luxury vacation. And it's, once again, this concierge model. All of these new companies work on what some of them are calling a country club model. You pay an annual fee, or you pay a one-time lump membership payment. So there's another company called Sovereign Deed that is even bigger than HelpJet and is offering comprehensive VIP disaster rescue. You pay $50,000 a year. But back to HelpJet, you pay as if you're joining a country club, and then if a hurricane is coming to your part of Florida, you get an early alert, and a concierge calls you, or you call the HelpJet concierge, and you tell them if you want to go to Disneyland, if you want to book some five-star resort, and they bill it as an escape from the failures that we witnessed during Hurricane Katrina. It says, escape the madness, the lines, the chaos, just have a first-class experience. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. You read this, and it seems like something that the yes men, the satirists have pulled off. And, when I first read about this, I actually emailed the yes men and asked them if they were behind it, but it is not satire. This is actually happening.
NAOMI KLEIN's Sovereign Deed, you mentioned. Talk about this company.
Well, this is happening, simultaneous to the wildfires. There's a company called Sovereign Deed. It's one of the key. It's connected to the mercenary firm Triple Canopy, and also a retired brigadier general back from Iraq named Richard Mills is one of the key executives in this company, and they have just announced plans to set up a kind of a privatized FEMA in Pellston, Michigan, northern Michigan, a rural part of Michigan that happens to have a very modern regional airport. And the idea is that they're going to be turning Pellston, Michigan into their national disaster response center, once again, only for their members. So if you go to the Sovereign Deed website, and I really recommend that people do read about this company in their own words, because what's really extraordinary about it, Amy, and this is where you have some similarities with a company like Blackwater, is that it's run by people straight out of the military and intelligence who have now gone into the private sector, and they're saying to people, they're scaring people, they're saying, you can't count on FEMA. You can't count on the National Guard. We live in disastrous times. Their website is just filled with sort of apocalyptic news about terrorist attacks, climate change, all of the pandemics, all of the things that we might face, and we think we're going to face them collectively. But their message is, you can't count on the government. I should know. I used to work there last week or whatever it is. Pay your $50,000 membership and $15,000 annual fees. And this company is stockpiling drugs, fuel, water, and for an extra premium payment, you can get a VIP rescue in the midst of some sort of unnamed disaster. And this is just amazing, Amy. I mean, think about the way the country responded after September 11th. The heroes of that tragedy were the first responders. And when the Bush administration announced the Department of Homeland Security and this whole new era of Homeland Security, I think people really thought that that meant a support and funding of the public first responders whose mission it is to protect the whole country, everyone, not just the VIPs. Now here we are, 6 years later, and the situation in California, we heard once again there weren't enough firefighters. The National Guard was in Iraq. The public sector, despite all the propaganda around Schwarzenegger, there were many, many failures. But now we see this emergence of this parallel VIP privatized disaster infrastructure.
On that issue of AIG, American International Group, that has fire break, the fire break spray systems, the wealthiest zip codes in the country, you write about, protected. What does this mean for higher insurance rates for regular working people in California?
Well, I mean, I think what they set the bar at a whole new level, and I think what's going to happen now, and we're hearing this, Firebreak is saying they're getting many more calls, and that this is the new standard. This was their little laboratory, and if your house burned down next to somebody who had this level of fire protection, you're going to call your insurance company and going, why didn't I have my home sprayed with special fire retardant? I mean, why wouldn't you if you're paying very high premiums already? So now what I think we're going to see is a new race where all of the insurance companies are now going to start offering these VIP services. And yeah, rates will go up. But I think more than that, as I've been talking about this with people, what we're going to hear more of is sort of blaming the victims of these natural disasters who don't pay the higher premiums to get this special service. You're starting to hear the language of personal responsibility, much like the sort of welfare debates of it's up to you to protect you and your family. You can't look to the government. It's very similar, actually, to the way in which people discuss health care, that it's your personal responsibility. Now it's your personal responsibility to protect your family from terrorist attacks, from climate change. And the assumption is we can't count on the state, which is just extraordinary when you think about the hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent since September 11th in the name of Homeland Security. Where has all that money gone? It's gone to these private companies who have built this parallel sort of shadow state.
NAOMI KLEIN, talk about the floods in Mexico that haven't gotten half as much attention.
Well, I mean, this is in many cases, people in Mexico are saying this is a greater disaster than Hurricane Katrina, more displacement, and it's really made very, very little. There's been very little news. There's been very little charitable giving comparatively. People are talking about a kind of a disaster fatigue. I've been tracking it, and we've been getting emails to our website about sort of early examples of disaster capitalism in Mexico. It's a little bit too early to tell. But I think what we're seeing internationally, and what I think we should watch for in Mexico, is that in the same way that we see these companies domestically who see climate change as an emerging market, a big business, not, and we have to be clear, in developing alternative energy, sustainable energy, but just in servicing this increasingly volatile, dangerous, warming world. Well, in Peru this summer, there was an earthquake. And there was another one of these breakthroughs in disaster capitalism, where after the earthquake, an American company, an American service company called Aramark, got the contract to build evacuation camps, which is something that's traditionally done by the UN, traditionally done by NGOs. Now it's a private contractor, a for-profit company that actually provides food for prisons, going in there and seeing disaster response as internationally as an emerging market. And these are the first evacuation camps in the world that I know of that come with mini McDonald's outlets. So, I mean, this really is seen, and I think we need to understand this. Disasters are seen by a growing sector of the economy as an exciting new market opportunity. And so we're in a situation where these companies are going to be putting, or are already putting, a counter pressure on the government, where you have the citizens, you have the people of the world saying, we want action on climate change. But these companies have a vested interest in just staying on the same disastrous course. But the two-tiering of disaster response, I think we really need to think of very urgently, because this is moving really fast. You know, Amy, at the end of the book, at the end of the shock doctrine, I sort of predict that this is what's going to happen. I didn't expect it to happen 3 months after the book came out. I was thinking, years, not months. And of course, I take no pleasure in being right about this prediction. This is what I call in the book a situation of disaster apartheid. And when the stakes of this, I think we see really clearly in the healthcare system and in the education system, that when the elites can opt out of a public system, the urgency about addressing a crisis in the public system, a crisis in the public school system, a crisis in the public health system totally erodes, because they're outside the system. They're sending their kids to